First of all, my name is Kevin Klett. I run marketing and product management for 128 Technology, and we license all of our software on a term license, so 1, 3-year, and 5-year term licenses. And that license gives you license to all the capabilities of the software-based router. So there's no slicing and dicing or nickeling and diming you from a feature perspective. That software license gets you unlimited access to the Conductor software, so there's no separate license for the Conductor management software or the APIs or any of the additional capabilities. The third thing that's really unique is that when we deliver an HA router, so we deliver our licensing on a capacity basis, starting at 5 gigabits per second up to 200 gigabits per second. And that router license gets you high availability as well. So say, for example, if you're buying a Cisco software-based router, you want to run it on 2 machines, that's 2 licenses. So in our model, that's a single license because we consider that a single node.
First, like clarification, 5 megabit, even all the way up to 200 gigabit. I think you said 5 gigs. So,
thanks.
IoT applications driving us down to trickles of bandwidth, but you can still use the same experience and much lower price.
All the way up to, you said 20 gigs?
200 gigabits.
200, I was going to say, because we were talking about, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Right. Does that answer your question, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay.
The basics are fine. That's fine.
Great.
The pricing and the quotes are crazy simple, so it's literally buy what you need and deploy it how you need it. So
And it's just a per instance license per instance of the right.
HA.
So we just choose bandwidth and the term.
Yep.
And that's it.
Okay.
HA is included.
And then the HA
right?
is
So if you prefer 2 physical platforms, I recall, so you literally just buy 2 physical platforms, but it's 1 router and 1 router license and the total bandwidth of that router. So you get physical diversity for the same price.
Do these licenses pool, or am I binding a license to a instance of the software?
So they're not a pooled license, they're an instance license. And it's a trust model, so there's no license keys. We're not tying it to MAC addresses or anything of that sort. And it's managed and reported on by the Conductor, so you can manage the license deployment within your network as well. So if you needed, 105 megabit routers, you'd have 500 licenses, either 1, 3, or 5-year terms.
So based on the model, it seems like this is something that would be fairly easy to build up in a lab for testing purposes. How difficult is it to get limited, 30-day access or something along those lines, just for that labbing perspective? And
Right. Well, so there's 2 sides of that. One is like what the different environments are. Sorry, but first of all, we do trial licenses all the time. Right, and soon on Amazon, you'll also have a trial instance there. It's not currently available, but we just launched our hourly licensing on Amazon as well. So you can spin it up, a 100 meg router in an Amazon instance and play with it there. Also, I think I'll turn it over to maybe Lane to talk about our trial environment that we've set up within our cloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have actually, if you wanted to just play with the software and get accustomed to it, if you don't have any software or virtual instances available, we have an environment that we call Onramp that we can provide seats for in a scheduled window. You give you like a day or a week where you have an environment that it's not a complete sandbox, but will allow you to start from scratch, install the software, follow kind of a self-guided lesson to set up an SD-WAN type scenario and to see how it's done through our data model and actually using the software.
Okay.
And to the point earlier about like license transfer, for example, and associating a license with a box. Just for example, we have a customer who, this is one of the cloud providers that was referenced earlier. For PCI reasons, they destroy their head-end routers in the cloud periodically and rebuild it. And they, we don't even, like, they just do it. Like, there's no real license to transfer. It's just, automatically.
Is there any licensing for the Conductor?
No.
No, so if you buy just a single license, then you can install the Conductor and then, okay.
It's included.
Yeah, no matter how many instances of the Conductor. So you may actually have GI diverse instances of the Conductor.
Oh, make sure you
Sorry, thank you. So yeah, as many instances as you need.
Yep.
In the AWS hourly instances, there's a nominal fee for the Conductor, but that's just on the hourly instance. We had to put in something, so.
Okay.
So in terms of thinking about this and going up against competition, you've focused a lot of the discussion on we don't do tunneling, we can be more efficient with your bandwidth. But aside from that, are you doing things like we're less expensive than the other SD-WAN market leaders, or what else is the value proposition besides those one or two things?
I found that we can chop a zero off of some hardware-based proposals, right? So when you bring the appliance, you bring kind of the legacy, baggage. There's a whole different price point they want to hit up front, right? And so by really crunching down the price of the hardware and then buying the available bandwidth that you're truly using, we're extremely price competitive, right?
Although I guess if I'm talking about a large deployment, I would say, but then I've got to get somebody to install your software on a bunch of boxes and ship them as opposed to buying appliances.
No, you can deliver it as an appliance, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I heard that point kind of made not too clearly earlier. Right. There's literally a storefront that literally you can buy a 128T appliance, and it's X number of dollars, and it's pre-installed, and you can define the IP address of your conductor even before you ever receive the box. There's a web-based provisioning approach where you literally click the address of the conductor into the pre-installed software. So it's, there's the end user feels it is an appliance experience, right? And so the operational cost of then installing that appliance aligns with zero touch provisioning. So that'll come online to the conductor.
Right. The other thing to add there is that many of our enterprise customers receive our software, our capabilities through a service provider of some sorts. So they're doing all of that assembly and setup in advance. But for those who want to go out their own, as Don said, we do have partners like Arrow Electronics who offers up the web store. You can literally, order it online and have it shipped to your property.
I know one of the big hesitations around white box is the idea that I no longer have one person to call, right? It's no longer, now I have kind of two vendors. I have the person who makes the hardware and the person who makes the software. Are you doing anything to minimize that hurdle for your customers?
Yeah, well, we found we provide a very direct touch in terms of support, either directly what we do and through our partners, and very rarely do we have a case where a customer can't get that level of support. And then we partner with the hardware vendors, and we help coordinate any RMAs or any hardware-related issues if necessary. We've seen very few of them, quite frankly. The white box, mean
I'm not saying it's a valid argument. I'm just saying it's an argument. It's one of the things that
I'll just say this.
People say all the time.
I'll just say the fear of that situation is much greater than the reality, and quite frankly, we've made it pretty seamless for most of our customers.
So let me just ask it bluntly: Are you offering to be the first phone call, and that you'll help with the hardware component if that's what it becomes?
Yeah, when we sell directly, for sure.
Yeah.
Or it could be a partner or a service provider that provides that first call.
Sure, yeah. If you're getting it through a managed service, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely direct touch for enterprise.
Okay.
And one other thing that's kind of the way we provide the software that runs on top of just a standard Linux distribution. If pretty much if we stop our software and something isn't working just in Linux, it's probably a hardware problem. So we haven't had any back and forth real arguments about whether it's hardware or software.
Okay.
And we maintain manageability whether it's running or not, right? And then when you swap out that box, it could have a new asset ID, right? That would then check into the conductor, or you could assign the same asset ID, and then you literally assign the same identity to that node. It pulls down the configuration and it comes up running. So it's not like the old days.
No.
High touch.
And thinking about how you guys are telling your story, when you talk to other SD-WAN vendors, they're immediately coming out of the gate with, we can help you start to reduce your WAN costs by migrating you off MPLS over time once you're comfortable with broadband or having a mix and match, whatever you're comfortable with. And we can do this application-based identity to give you that business policy kind of thing. And I don't hear you guys saying those kinds of things as much. Are you deliberately avoiding that?
It's table stakes. It's table stakes. So I have a T1. Did they tell you that they took 30% of that T1 bandwidth while you left the MPLS in place? In fact, the MPLS service providers like us because we don't do that to the existing MPLS network, right? And we don't lose anything with respect to being able to steer sessions and control and run BGP with the underlay. So we're literally able to jump right into that environment and not take away before we give something new. So many of them are trying to bring in a second circuit, but we can bring SD-WAN to the entire network.
I feel like the market's really pretty understood what those table stakes are. I mean, if you listen to Gartner, there's 64 companies who claim to be SD-WAN companies. So the bar's set relatively low for the table stakes stuff. And what's really interesting is the hypersegmentation, the tunnel-free savings, like the agility that we bring in terms of managing policy in an intent-based way. We think those are really big differentiators. So we end up focusing on those items, solving the hard problems, and going beyond SD-WAN. So many of the customers that we've talked about here today are looking at us or using us not just in their own network for SD-WAN, but they may start off in a completely different use case. We're going after the routing market, not just the SD-WAN market.
What about IPv6 support?
So that cloud demo setup has some really cool use cases of V6. One customer came to us and said, hey, we've got overlapping space. We don't really necessarily want to go to more overlapping space or try to map it back into 10 space. Hey, can you help us with like a V6 migration? And in fact, we have another large customer that's struggling with the same thing right now. We can do, so a service can be an IPv6 address. The tenant can be a V4 address. The tenant can be a V6 address, service be a V4 address. Again, since we're making a decision as we egress the fabric as to what the addressing and the address space should be, it's super easy to now provision V6 and V4. Japan's ahead of the game, I'd say, with respect to V6 deployments and having V6 transport, right? And underutilized V6 networks, and we can use those as transport for V4. So there's a whole ton of flexibility in the data model and just the deployment model to do V4, V6 migrations and interworking. We didn't emphasize that earlier in the day. Yeah.
But you do support it in the underlay, and you do support it in your, I'll say, service and not overlay.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Give me a call, and we can set up a V4, V6 demo and stuff. It's pretty cool.
I think you mentioned it earlier, but what was your largest site deployment?
Biggest one rolling out is 5,000 sites. So
5,000 sites.
Yeah. But we've won, I believe, now bigger ones, so they're just not rolling out.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, there's like a pure enterprise build out, the 5,000 sites is our sort of our benchmark right now, but we're in the precipice of 10,000 site deployments. And if you think about what the service providers are doing, that could actually extend in a multi-tenanted way even larger. So we haven't seen scale as being a limiting factor in any of our deployments just yet.
Because we put a lot of work into that.
What about documentation? So I say this with some scars from other solutions. So when it comes to SD-WAN, it feels like the product is made and documentation's an afterthought. So where are you guys at product documentation? Is that freely and openly available, or is it behind some sort of registration? Like, what do you guys do for documentation?
We have an excellent customer success organization that has, in fact, thought ahead of the game in pulling together a portal, right? We have a portal called Interchange. It's on its second iteration. All the documentation is contained there, and it is published in completion. We've got all the release notes. It's not our first rodeo. It's an experienced engineering team, development process, and so we do release notes and all the cases that go along with that. And Interchange is also a forum, right? We do a lot of video training. We do folks like different ways than reading a book. They like to see it in action, and so we do a lot of video training. It's posted to Interchange, and tons of folks post questions, right? And so you're stuck on something, or you want to know an answer to a question. Interchange is a lively community that's in fact pretty much every 128T engineer in here you see actually posts to Interchange and answers questions.
Who is that available to? Is that just customers, or as a non-customer could I go sign up for that?
I think if the secret handshake or something.
Secret handshake? Yeah. All right. So just
follow Victoria.
Just as a suggestion. Yeah. It gives a level of confidence if I can look through the documentation before I'm buying something.
And we do that actually
Right.
part of the trial process.
Okay.
Yeah. You're trying a company.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're proud of that. So
Good.
we want to show your company.
Thinking about one of the customer demos you walked through was CMC, where you had a ton of deployments in Africa. And thinking about your conductor infrastructure, is it possible, and is there a need for sort of a controller of controllers when you're working across that many countries or environments?
The router itself is a controller of controllers. All right, so it's running the same software on the controller, the conductor, and which is essentially a configuration repository. That's netconf pushed down to the router itself, right? So if that conductor goes offline, there's high availability, geo-distributed. You're going to have a really good shot at getting to one regardless of your transport. And it doesn't need to talk much.
But if I'm CMC and I'm running sites for a whole bunch of customers, do I want to have sort of an Uber conductor that can do some management for all of them?
That's a good question, yeah. Scaling and, no matter what happens, be it 5,000 sites, 10,000 sites, you're going to hit a number, right? And you want a conductor of conductors. So absolutely, we call it the MAC.
Yeah, well, I was going to say their conductor actually lives in the cloud. It lives in AWS, and all of the sites that are deployed all across Africa have internet reachability and are able to connect up to, I can't remember what region it is. It's one of the EMEA regions, but connects up to the conductor successfully. If they wanted to, they could deploy another one in another region for geo redundancy. They haven't done that. They haven't seen the need yet. They actually have, even though they cover a large geographical space, the number of routers they have connecting to that single conductor is actually, they're not nearly our busiest conductor. There's other deployments that have way more routers connecting to a single conductor.
But wouldn't they want some kind of, or their customers might want some kind of multi-tenancy?
Yes, they do. And actually, yeah, that one does specifically actually want to, so that's where we do have a product we're working on called the multi-authority conductor. Now we've sort of defined an authority as all the routers under the scope of one network domain. If you're a managed service provider, you might have multiple domains, and that's something that's in the works. I'm not sure exactly when we're targeting that, but it's a request we've had from different customers, them actually being a specific one. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
API driven, right? So top level conductor hitting multiple authority level conductors. And the cool thing about that is now authentication could live within an authority, right? While you've got some managed service provider top level domain. So yeah, we've been working again hard on that scaling problem. And also that's a security problem too. So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the time when we talk to somebody with SD-WAN, they mention their appliance is going to be the edge device primarily, wherever you put it in. But a lot of those are dealing with more of the security side and things like that. And then we look at your solution, and you mentioned more around the routing. Where do you see your appliance fitting in? I know you mentioned you could hand off some of the work, whether you wanted to do the higher level security analysis, to something like a Palo Alto firewall or something like that. Where do you see your appliance fitting in? Is it that edge device? Is it behind the edge? Where?
Well, I think it really depends. The premise is we're a session-based software router, so it depends on the use case. So in some cases, it's purely edge. It could be IoT or branch edge or remote edge, say at a drilling site or a well site within an industrial type of environment. We're, I think, the only multi-hop sort of software-based networking company in the WAN, so that means that the router can exist at the data center edge or within, say, a transit environment or in the public cloud. So I think the definition of edge versus aggregation or core or data center just depends on where you're using the software.
Yeah,
we're not limited by the hardware, is what I'm trying to say.
If it's an SD-WAN deployment, if it's something that looks like an SD-WAN deployment, it obviously makes sense for us to be connected as close to the WAN as possible, just so that there's no other devices upstream of us that influence whether our traffic is routed over WAN A or WAN B, because we want to be able to deterministically test the WAN paths. But we have non-SD-WAN deployments where we alluded to some of these SaaS type companies where we are sitting behind the end customer's edge, just deep in their network, and we're just sending traffic up to the cloud for those specific applications.
If you remember, it's an ICSA certified firewall. We literally went through the certification. We've got all the traffic alarms and traffic information to act as the firewall. If the service chaining of third-party tools is to work with some best-of-breed partners, right? So cloud-based with tons of cloud-based URLs. If you want to, work with Zscaler or Palo Alto can embed. And some of that's also to address, I think, the earlier question of, how do you work with the security team versus the routing team? But we're absolutely a combined routing and security package, right? And again, it kind of depends upon your traffic flows, your preferred traffic patterns as to how you manage that.
Given that you've made the effort to go to like an L4 firewall down the road, could you see yourself booting up to the next gen level?
So we want to be a router, session smart router, but we're doing selective. So one of the requests we have is advanced application classification, for example, right? So we are developing a feature where we are going to have categories of application and deny and allow rules based on the category. That is the most used firewall feature.
Sure.
Everyone wants that content filtering based on URLs, right? So we are doing that. That's in the near-term roadmap. The second thing people look at is the classic URL filtering, right? So that's the second thing. All that comes into the content filtering, and that's definitely in the roadmap. And I think we want to be a router, but we will do incremental features, and for advanced features, we are definitely going to use Palo Alto and Zscaler.
It's the decrypt the customer's traffic versus not decrypt, right?
So
and
we want to be at the layer 3, layer 4 level. The advantage is that, right, if you look at the traffic pattern today, right, 80% of the traffic is encrypted, right? And if you look at the certificates or the SNI, right, in the TLS exchange, you can exactly tell what kind of application it is, right? So we can do application classification without actually decrypting the packet, right? When people want to do content filtering based on looking at the data inside the HTTP, we don't want to do it. Right. Then you need a bigger box, and the cost goes up, and so on, right? The best deployment model we have right now is that you have a Palo Alto or a Zscaler at the centralized location. And what we do is that we have routers at the edge. And if there is a firewall treatment required, the thing people do is that either they offload it directly to the Palo Alto. The second model they do is that they route the packet to the data center, and from the data center, they have IPsec tunnel to the Palo Alto instance. These are the two different deployment models we have in that area. Because every Palo Alto instance is pretty expensive, so they want a single instance in the data center, and they want us to route based on the service.
Also, as you go forward with Quick and other things, you're not allowed to do a proxy and see the traffic. So, our banking apps don't allow anyone to proxy and see my traffic. You can't scrub it. It's encrypted. It's encrypted. That's it. So we believe the world is moving towards that. We believe that the security things for layer 7 and higher should be at the endpoints, not at the network layer. It's going away more and more. PII traffic is becoming more and more difficult to see.